The power of story is that it is one of the few ways we can really feel empathy and encourage empathy. Built into the idea of story is the idea that you have a protagonist. And when you have a protagonist, the whole trick that all of us are trying to do is bring the audience into that protagonist's eyes, behind their eyes.
Hi, my name is Jared, and this is Horror Obsession. Today, I want to talk about Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. First of all, Get Out is an exceptionally well-crafted horror masterpiece. The fact it was made on a budget of only $4.5 million and grossed $255 million is a testament to how desperate audiences were for an intelligent examination of race relations, and good horror movies in general. Whenever I hear people talk about this movie, they typically reference the frequent Easter eggs, subtle foreshadowing, and overall construction of the story, but I rarely hear people talk about what the movie is actually about. This is probably because most people came away from this movie with the impression the message is racism bad, and then never thought about it beyond that. While the movie is ostensibly about racism bad, this is such a superficial interpretation and gross oversimplification that it really misses the point. On the one hand, myopically focusing on the details of the movie, such as the symbols outside the Armitage house or Rose using Fruit Loops separated from the milk, is missing the forest for the trees, meaning this perspective is too focused on the details to see the movie's theme. On the flip side, viewing this movie as racism bad is far too focused on the general message of the movie and does not get into the details enough to understand what Jordan is trying to convey. So what is he trying to convey? First, let's go through a quick summary of the movie. As is tradition, I will warn you that the rest of this review is very heavy on spoilers, which should be kind of obvious since I just said I would summarize the movie. Get Out is brilliant and a movie which is best experienced without prior knowledge of the plot, though it is constructed so beautifully that it holds up extremely well across multiple viewings. So check it out. Alright, with that out of the way, let's talk about the plot. The introduce the horror scene is Lakeith Stanfield walking through a suburban neighborhood where he is abducted by an unknown assailant and shoved into the trunk of a car, which is a quick and efficient way of establishing the core elements of the movie. Next, we meet Chris, the protagonist.
I'm the protagonist.
Who is going to visit his girlfriend's parents' house. He asks his girlfriend if she told her parents he is black, which she endearingly says doesn't matter and she wouldn't have invited him to her house if her parents were racist. Chris is having his best friend, Rod, come take care of his dog while he is away, and off they go, but on the way they hit a deer, prompting Rose to call the police to report the accident. The officer asks for Chris's ID, which Rose views as being motivated by racial profiling, and stands up for Chris, saying he does not need to show his ID since he did nothing wrong. The officer backs down and Chris is appreciative Rose was willing to stand up for him. Next, they arrive at Rose's parents' house where she introduces Chris to her parents, played wonderfully by Catherine Keener and Bradley Whitford. They show Chris around the house and there is racial subtext everywhere. From Whitford showing Chris some souvenirs he got while visiting Africa, to talking about how his father lost in the Olympics to Jesse Owens, to discussing how there is black mold in the basement, and finally by introducing Chris to the house servants, who are all black. Next, the parents guess Chris smokes cigarettes and offer to hypnotize him to get him to quit, since Catherine Keener is a psychiatrist. He declines, but that night he is having strong cravings and goes out to smoke where the groundskeeper is sprinting towards him, but veers away at the last second. Shaken by the experience, he goes back inside where Catherine Keener does go on to hypnotize him, resulting in Chris sinking down into his subconscious in what they refer to as a sunken place. He wakes up the next day and questions the whole experience because, well, frankly, it sounds kinda crazy. So he stays and the weekend continues, which involves numerous affluent white people coming to the house. Rose and Chris go around meeting the guests who all comment on his race in various ways, from discussing how they think Tiger Woods is the best golfer ever, to asking Rose if having sex with a black man truly is better, and one couple saying fair skin used to be in fashion, but
now the pendulum is swung back. Black is in fashion.
Chris feels more and more of an outsider and so seeks out the one other black person at the party, who turns out to be Lakeith Stanfield from the opening scene. He is acting very strange, however, culminating with Chris wanting to take a photo to send to Rod. However, this causes him to freak out and start screaming at Chris to get out.
Get out.
Sorry, man.
Okay. Get out!
Yo!
Yeah!
Yo, chill, man.
Get out!
Chill! Chill, man! Chill! Get the fuck out of here!
Whitford, who is a neurosurgeon, says he had a seizure, but is now back to normal, and he apologizes to everyone for his actions. Chris is clearly extremely uncomfortable with everything, but he loves Rose, so he wants to stick it out and ends up staying. That night, he shows Rod a picture of Lakeith, and Rod recognizes him as an ex-boyfriend of someone he knows.
Oh, fucking crazy. Yo, he's different.
No shit. Why is he dressed like that?
Chris finally comes to the realization he needs to get out of there and pleads with Rose to go home with him, which she agrees to do. While they are packing, Rose can't find her keys, so Chris starts to leave, but the family won't let him, and it is revealed Rose was in on the plot all along. Catherine Keener uses the hypnotism to subdue Chris, and then we find out the family has been using neurosurgery to transplant the brain of elderly white people into the bodies of young black people in a procedure they have named Coagula. Rod is concerned Chris never came back and tries going to the cops, who laugh in his face, saying surely Chris just ran off with his white girlfriend. Chris wakes up and has the whole thing explained to him and is put back asleep by the hypnotism. While they are prepping the procedure, Chris wakes up again and uses the cotton from the chair he is bound to block his ears and then overpower Jeremy, the brother. He then proceeds to kill Whitford, Keener, and Jeremy and goes to drive off, but his desire to save the other black people whose bodies have been taken over by the coagula causes him to pick up the housekeeper. She naturally turns on him and he crashes his car. Rose hears this and comes out with a rifle and then reveals the housekeeper is her grandmother and then sends the groundskeeper after Chris. He catches him, but Chris uses his phone to temporarily return the man's consciousness to his own, and he proceeds to shoot Rose and then kill himself. Chris tries to strangle Rose, but a police car shows up, and the audience can see how bad this looks.
It doesn't matter what happened. What matters is what looks like what happened, and what looks like what happened is pretty nasty.
But surprise, it is actually Rod who saves Chris and they drive off, and credits. Oh boy, there is so much to unpack with this movie. Where to even begin? I guess let's discuss the meticulous construction of the movie first. The groundskeeper is the grandfather who lost to Jesse Owens, so he chose a black body who is good at running, which is why he was sprinting outside earlier. The hat he wears is to hide the scar from the neurosurgery, and same with the housekeeper who wears her wig, and also Lakeith, who is seen wearing a hat during the party. The black mold comment by Whitford serves to put the audience in a state of unease, just like Chris, but also the basement holds the surgery area, so they use that as an excuse to get Chris to not go down there. And also, as a double entendre about the bodies being a mold, which will be filled to create a new person. There are a few Easter eggs about The Shining, from Lakeith referring to the suburbs as a hedge maze in the opening scene, clearly a reference to the iconic hedge maze in The Shining, as well as Flight 237 in the background of Rod's phone call,
Flight 237,
a reference to Room 237 in The Shining. Part of the beauty of the movie and why the twist is executed so masterfully is it actually makes perfect sense and recontextualizes the rest of the movie in a way which makes subsequent viewings even more fruitful than the first. For example, when Rose is refusing to let Chris show his ID to the officer, it initially comes off as a cute way of her expressing her love and standing up for her man against racism. However, really she is trying to avoid creating a paper trail. If the officer sees the ID, he will log it and then it will be known where Chris was last seen. Additionally, when Jeremy is talking to Chris at the dinner table, he says jujitsu is all about mind games and thinking multiple steps ahead of your opponent. Then when Chris fights him later, Chris does not use brute strength to overpower him, but instead uses Jeremy's actions against him. Jeremy is kicking the door shut to prevent Chris from getting out, and Chris thinks multiple steps ahead of Jeremy. Yet another example is how the family wants Chris to stop smoking so badly, which on the surface level is because they want to avoid Rose being exposed to secondhand smoke.
You smoke in front of my daughter.
I'm gonna quit, I promise.
That's my kid. That is my kid.
But on another level is because they want to convince Chris to allow them to hypnotize him. But even another level is because they want Chris's body to be healthy for when they sell it off and have someone take it over. And finally, the cotton he uses to block his ears is a clear reference to cotton as being a symbol of black oppression during slavery, so Jordan Peele inverts the symbol to become one of freedom and liberation. Okay, so all of this is very interesting and shows how much thought and care went into the construction of this film, but really all of this is superficial and does not speak to the actual theme of the movie in any way. It is impressive, yes, and Get Out justifiably won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay because of this meticulous structure, but what was Jordan actually trying to say? Well, Jordan has said he wanted to make a movie which captures a very specific kind of fear. That is the fear minority men experience when going to meet their white girlfriend's family. Kind of obvious since that is the literal plot of the movie, but he does such a great job of executing this, I want to discuss it. Hitchcock has said in order to drive suspense, you must have a, quote, bomb under the table, end quote, which the audience knows about but the characters do not. I talk about this much more thoroughly in my Alien video, so check that one out if you want a detailed analysis of what this means. In Get Out, the bomb under the table is the threat of racially motivated violence. This is a fear that every single minority in America has felt in their lifetime, and this type of fear reaches a zenith when you are going to visit a girlfriend's parents.
Girl. You know I'm mad at you because you never take my advice.
Like what?
Like, don't go to a white girl parent's house.
You are staying in their home, trying to adhere to their specific customs, trying to not offend anyone, make a good impression, and remain in control of your emotions, all while understanding that there is a long, long history of extreme hatred and violence associated with interracial couples, and I don't mean a long time ago. Interracial marriage was only fully legalized in America in 1967, meaning many people currently alive lived through the period of time when a relationship like the one Chris and Rose have was not even allowed legally. This is captured by the stereotypical fear of being chased off the lawn with a shotgun.
He said I was the first black guy you ever dated.
Yeah, so what?
Yeah, so it's his uncharted territory for, you know, I don't want to get chased off the lawn with a shotgun.
You're not going to. First of all, my dad would have voted for Obama a third time if he could have.
Jordan once again plays off this expectation by having Rose be the one who chases him off the lawn with a gun, expressing the real deepest fear held by minority and specifically black men. The fear that you are being used for your physical attributes or cultural involvement, and that even the girl who says she loves you and stands up for you in public is actually just like everybody else, and not only does she not love you, but she would betray you at the drop of a hat at the request of her family. This fear goes far beyond any kind of physical pain, and Daniel Kaluuya does an amazing job conveying the emotional anguish associated with this fear. The fear Jordan displays in Get Out is even more complex than this, and goes into the idea of extinction, which I discussed in my Psychology of Fear video. The idea of being a passenger in your own body is extremely terrifying. Having lost all of your autonomy and being forced to observe someone else using your body for whatever they want. This is clearly reminiscent of slavery, but Jordan was going for a slightly different interpretation of the sunken place in general. The entire movie is an allegory about race relations in the United States, of course, but Jordan views the sunken place as being a metaphor for the forced silence black people endure. The majority culture is more than happy to use black people's bodies for entertainment, but the second they start to try and speak up and have their voices heard, they are immediately silenced, threatened with losing endorsement deals, and...
So keep the political commentary to yourself, or as someone once said, shut up and dribble.
Even though athletes have as much right to talk about politics as anyone else in a free country. I mean, the current president is a reality TV show host, and you're trying to tell me LeBron James can't voice his opinion? Jordan uses sound design and visual storytelling to get this message across, specifically by having Chris scream while in the sunken place but having no sound escape. He has been imprisoned in his own body, forced by affluent white people to be a passive observer and to do whatever they want. In order to clarify and crystallize his message, he makes the family liberal.
I hate the way it looks.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
Which also hints at Jordan's criticism of a post-racial world after Obama.
I wrote the movie primarily during the post-racial lie. So the Obama era, when everyone was saying, hey, we're past racism. right?
We did it.
We did it. And the notion of sort of bringing up racism was almost thought of as like the perpetuating it.
By involving more than the family and showing the black police officers as being complicit in the system by simply ignoring and gaslighting Rod into believing his concerns are crazy, he also illuminates the core message. Racism is not just people burning crosses in your yard and lynching black people, though that happens too.
Setting fires to a cross and Nazi swastika in an open field in northwest Georgia.
It is saying you can't be racist because you have dated a black guy or girl, as if having sex with someone somehow gives you the moral high ground. It is saying you can't be racist because you voted for Obama, and then objectifying black people's bodies for your entertainment. It is silencing their voices when they express opinions you don't agree with. It is gentrifying black culture.
Yo, he's different. No shit. Why is he dressed like that?
It is bringing up race in every conversation with a minority person, even in a positive way, because that signals you view the color of someone's skin as being the most important aspect of who that person is. This brings me along to my final point, which is that Armitage family is not really the villain of Get Out, but rather the entire system which allows the Armitage family to exist. Jordan originally had the ending of the film have a police officer show up and arrest Chris, and then the final scene is Chris in prison serving a life sentence for murder. The ending was determined to be too bleak, and so they reshot it with Rod showing up to save the day. But as Jordan has said, having the shot of the cruiser show up before you realize it's Rod, the audience immediately recognizes that Chris is screwed, because no matter what people say, everyone knows black people are treated extremely unfairly by the justice system.
It doesn't matter what happened. What matters is what looks like what happened. And what looks like what happened is pretty nasty.
Jordan is able to evoke the same feeling from the original ending simply by showing the cruiser, taking advantage of the known implicit bias of the legal system and solidifying the idea that a post-racial America is now, and always was, nothing more than a facade, a superficial lie certain people used in order to distract from the pernicious, perpetual, and sinister racism still pervasive in America today. Overall, Get Out is a brilliant movie which captures a very specific form of fear hardly ever seen before in film, though by Jordan's own admission, two of the closest movies, besides Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Both his wife and his son were killed in a train accident in Belgium 8 years ago. And John, I haven't even told you his name. Mom, it's John Wade Prentice. Isn't that a lovely name?
John Wade.
Joanna Prentice I'll be. But Mom,
are The Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby, both of which gave a similar treatment to the fear felt by women who felt their autonomy and individuality was being stripped away by a misogynist society. Get Out uses a similar structure to tell a similar story, except about racism, and succeeds in a shockingly effective way, especially for a first-time director. There is so much more to this movie. I could have made this video twice as long, but rather than belaboring the point, I want to end on a final thought. In a society where overt racism is universally rejected, how do people now express racism?
What do you mean, his deal?
I just talked to him, dude's whole vibe's hostile.
Did he say something?
It's not what he says, it's how he says it, you know?